This is the former Deep River Savings Bank here in Deep River, Connecticut. Nowadays, all boarded up and empty. And this is the approximate view from the window of the bank. Over 120 years ago, that very same view was held by a man named Harry Tyler, a night watchman for the bank who just happened to be on duty right around 1 in the morning on December 13th, 1899. On that fateful evening, Tyler actually noticed something stirring in the black of the night. A man walking down the road here, a pretty odd sight for such a late hour. Immediately, Tyler's adrenaline started to flare up. I mean, after all, the only reason he was here in the first place was because of a letter sent to the bank warning of an impending robbery attempt. According to the letter, the Deep River Bank would be attacked when the moon has waned and the nights have grown darker. And now, it certainly seemed as if that warning just might have some legs to it. You see, as Tyler peered out that window in the early hours of the morning, he watched with horror as one man became 4. Yeah, right before his very eyes, 3 more figures snuck out from behind the first. Apparently, they had all been walking down the street in like a single file line, in perfect lockstep, synchronizing the swing of their arms and the step of their feet. So their intention with this like weird movement pattern was clear to Tyler. The men were trying to condense the sound of their footsteps and hide their silhouettes together, all in an attempt to convince any witnesses that only one man was approaching the bank that night. So with secrecy and cunning like that, there was no doubt that this was the heist foretold in the letter. And so, sensing the danger, our humble watchman withdrew from the window, grabbed a hold of his old reliable Winchester repeating riot gun, loaded that thing up tight with number 9 buckshot, and stood as still as a statue, melding with the shadows of the unlit bank, invisible to the peering eye of an outsider. Until he heard a sound, the unmistakable ring of a chisel hard at work on the locked bank window. And then, even worse, the wooden creak of the window frame. The burglars had now officially broken into the bank. And that was enough for Tyler. He drew a bead on the dark shape trying to climb through the window and bang, pulled the trigger. Lead, glass, and thunder all exploded into the night as the shape pitched backwards out of sight. Tyler, expecting counterfire, he took cover inside the bank and waited, and waited, and waited. And after 10 minutes of silence, he went for the telephone and called for help. And after about an hour, a small posse of the townsfolk had congregated in a building across the street. Cautiously, they instructed Tyler to get down on his hands and knees and crawl like a baby all the way across the street, just in case the robbers were hiding behind a tree or something like that, waiting to shoot him in revenge. But Tyler made it to the safe house without an issue, so the townsfolk assumed the coast was clear, and off they went to go investigate the bank. And what do you know? There's the shape, still lying there on the ground, right at the base of the window. Tyler's riot gun had knocked one of the robbers dead, clean through the eye. After some deliberation among the townsfolk, everybody realized that they had no idea who this guy was. He's just a young, handsome, well-dressed, and completely unknown man with a big old mustache on his face. So, without any family or friends to consult on what to do with the body, they just buried him right here under a tiny little tombstone labeled X, Y, Z. Without a name or identity to attach to the grave, that's all they had to carve into the marker. And so, over 120 years later, here, the unknown robber sits in the very back of this very old cemetery. To this day, his name still a mystery. Kind of. You see, most modern accounts of this story will tell you that XYZ's real name is still completely unknown. I'm not so sure that's the case. Now, don't get me wrong here. I'm not like trying to tell you that I like solved the mystery of XYZ or that I found like some groundbreaking new evidence that nobody's ever seen before. It's just that in my research for this video, I kind of like stumbled upon a few accounts from back in the day with some pretty convincing theories on the real identity of Mr. Z here. Like for starters, I actually found buried in a single line of the Hartford Courant's reporting on the robbery that a lot of the townsfolk who saw the body actually claimed that they had like seen this dude before. Yeah, they said that like for a few days leading up to the robbery, they had seen this man like kind of skulking around the town pretending to be like a traveling salesman. But that's more just like a curious little detail than it is anything too substantial. But we got more specific stuff too. Like how about this? A tiny little article I found published in a Connecticut newspaper like several days after the robbery attempt. According to this passage, a local railroad worker actually came down to the Deep River morgue to like check out the body, and he made the claim that he was absolutely positive that this dead robber was a man named Griffin, who had been working on the railroad with him just like a few months prior. Again, loose, but at least we're getting a name this time. Or how about this? Here's the Hartford Courant again, this time talking about a detective that like discovered that the name Rogers was written plainly on the back of the dead robber's shirt. Like apparently nobody had noticed that like little detail until well after the shooting. By the way, while we're on the topic of kind of weird details, I'm sure by now you've noticed that like this story is just chock full of them. Like how about this? Apparently the tools that the criminals used to try and break into the bank were actually stolen from Watchman Tyler's own boathouse earlier that day. Like isn't that a crazy coincidence? Like the sound that Tyler heard on the window that night was his very own chisel that had just been stolen from him hours earlier. Like that's just wild. But hey, we're getting kind of off topic here. Like weird details aside, the most interesting point in this story is still undoubtedly the identity of the dead robber. So let's get back to that, right? I mean, those first few little tidbits I gave you were mostly pretty vague, but beyond those, I was actually able to dig up like a couple of accounts that get a whole lot more specific. Like this here. This is just one of a few articles I found claiming to have identified XYZ through a money order that was found in his jacket pocket. Apparently, the money order had been purchased by a man named F.E. King. And so, assuming that that must be the name of the deceased robber, the authorities set out to try and follow the lead. The order was made payable to another man named T.J. Farley, so the cops' first order of business was just to go and try and find that guy. I mean, obviously, who better to shed light on this money order thing than the man who was intended to cash it, right? And wouldn't you know it, they actually found him. Yeah, over in Albany, New York. Farley was spotted working as a bartender. And after a quick interview, the cops walked away with some pretty good information too. Like just to start, Farley's physical description of what King looked like lined up pretty much exactly with the dead man's appearance. But that's just the beginning. It actually gets even more intriguing than that. See, Farley actually said that King had been working on the railroad here in Albany, which lines up pretty well with the oil and grease stains that the coroner found imprinted onto the hands of the robber. Yeah, prior to the discovery of the money order, the coroner actually guessed that the dead robber must have been like a machinist or a mechanic or like something like that because of those stains. So a railroad worker just kind of falls right smack dab in line with that diagnosis. But by far, the most interesting tidbit here is the last conversation that Farley said he ever had with King. Apparently, King had borrowed some money from Farley, told him that he was going to be leaving Albany for a while, and then promised with conviction in his voice, "I will come back richer, or I won't come back at all." That's some pretty powerful stuff, right? I mean, I about like jumped out of my chair when I first read all that. But we're not even done. There's actually one more very pertinent article to take a look at here. This time something printed in the Boston Globe a whole 3 months after the original robbery. See, the Globe pretty unceremoniously buried this short little article smack dab in the middle of their 4th page back on February 23rd in the year 1900. And this particular article, it spoke with pretty much abject certainty that the identity of the mysterious Deep River burglar had been uncovered. His name was Frank Howard, or Tom Howard, or Frank Ellis, a relatively well-known crook active over in Detroit, Michigan. And according to this article, friends of Howard here on the East Coast had alerted Howard's family back home that he had been killed in the robbery. And then, in turn, his family just kind of cycled the news back around to New England, this time with a name attached to the crime. And there we go. Yet another name to throw into the ring. We got Rogers, King, Howard, Griffin. I even found some pretty convincing reporting saying that King from Albany and Howard from Michigan are actually the same person who had just spent different time living in 2 different spots. But at the end of the day, I can't tell you that I'm 100% confident that XYZ was any of these people. I can guess, I can show you stuff I found, but still, it just does not seem to me like anyone truly knew for sure who this guy was. Except for maybe one person. One more person that I haven't mentioned yet. One last little layer to pull back that is absolutely essential to this story. See, you might have noticed that I haven't had too much to say about the Watchman, Harry Tyler, since the start of the video. Well, the reason for that is that his story actually kind of veers off in a pretty bizarre direction right after the shooting. Because Tyler, he actually resigned from his position as bank watchman just a few days after the robbery attempt. Even a $500 reward couldn't get him to stay on his post. And the main reason for this resignation was that his nerves were just destroyed by the incident. I even found one quote from him saying that if he doesn't get away from the bank, he's gonna have a mental breakdown. But it wasn't just the memory of the shooting that had Tyler all freaked out either. No, Tyler had he had something a whole lot more tangible to worry about too. See, pretty quick after the robbery, all these letters started pouring into the Deep River post office, all addressed to Harry Tyler. Very concerning letters, death threats, promises that the life of XYZ would be avenged. People were anonymously writing this guy, telling him that they were after his head. So understandably, these letters kind of spooked Tyler, and he just started spending all his time working on building a boat and telling everybody that he's gonna leave the country and move somewhere far away where nobody knows who he is or that he ever killed anybody. And you can't really blame him, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but if I was getting all these letters promising my imminent death, I'd probably be losing my mind a bit too. But among all those threats of violence and revenge was another letter. One letter that kind of stuck out a bit from the rest. Because it wasn't a threat and it wasn't a promise. It was just a request. Some anonymous person had written Harry Tyler and very politely asked for him to carve the letters X, Y, Z into the grave marker of the deceased robber. And as you can see, Tyler agreed. Yeah, before that letter, XYZ wasn't XYZ. He wasn't anybody. He was just resting under a totally unmarked grave. No name, no nothing. But because of the request, now he is simply and only XYZ. His real name and history totally unknown to pretty much everybody. Or I guess I should say almost everybody. You see, if you find the right newspaper article or talk to the right person here in Deep River or just dig hard for the right anecdote, then you just might hear about a certain woman. A woman dressed in all black. who every year for decades after the death of XYZ would arrive here at the Deep River train terminal and march her way up to the top of the Fountain Hill Cemetery and stroll to the back of the graveyard and sit down under the shade of that gnarled old tree and then lay down in front of the grave of the forgotten robber a bouquet of flowers. And then she would just get up and walk right back down the hill, hop on the train and disappear until next year. Pretty wild, right? You know, according to one book I read, the last time anyone ever saw her do this was 1947. Like, think about that. That is 48 years after the original shooting. Like 48 years of making the journey to Deep River. Like 48 years of flowers and of remembering XYZ. Almost half a century. And during that time, nobody in Deep River ever bothered her. Like nobody tried to figure out who she was. Nobody ever tried to talk to her or ask her name. According to the locals, that just wouldn't be right. It wasn't their business. Why go bug this woman? Of course, I should probably mention that this whole woman in black thing, it could just as well be folklore as it could be fact, right? But if you ask me, I don't think that really matters too much, right? Because if you really boil down our two options here, it's either A, that one person wanted to remember the story of XYZ so much that they spent 48 years of their life coming out here to visit the guy, or B, a whole town wanted to remember the story of XYZ so much that they spent 124 years building up a legend around this little grave. So if you ask me, either one of those things is pretty cool. I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.